Jake, just make sure you unmute yourself when I mute everybody.
Fantastic. Hey, good morning, everybody. Hey, we're going to get started right at 1 minute after. I just want to give everybody plenty of time to get started. Okay? Make sure you mute your mic if you haven't already. And Steve will start us off in right at, depending on where you're at, 9:01, 10:01, 11:01, 12:01, or, if you're in Indonesia, 4:01 in the morning or whatever the time is there. So hang tight.
He wasn't here, and then I had this moment where I was like, "Am I supposed to be doing something?" Sorry.
Well, good morning, everyone. Great to see some familiar faces here. Awesome to see some new ones. Love it. Welcome to Morse Interactive's micro webinar series with a focus on workplace trends. Just before we get started, I just want to acknowledge our organization is based in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada, which is located on Treaty 6 territory and homeland of the Métis. Here to lend his insights on the topic of Generation Z is my friend and colleague, Jake Aguas. So welcome, Jake.
Thank you, Steve. Welcome. It's good to be here with you.
Awesome. And for those of you that don't know him, I'll just going to read his short bio here, and then we'll get into it. So Jake Aguas is a Gen expert and associate professor of management at the Crowell School of Business at Biola University, and a clinical adjunct professor of management at the Argyas School of Business and Economics at Chapman University and the University of California Irvine Mirage School of Business, where he teaches management, leadership, human resources, and entrepreneurship at the MBA and undergraduate levels. Jake has co-led international study tours to Beijing and Shanghai, China, and Hong Kong, instructing on culture, behavior, and economics in modern China, and has taught at the Townsend Institute for Leadership and Counseling at Concordia University. He has worked on philanthropic projects in the United Kingdom, South Africa, and Central America. Jake is an organizational consultant and practices internationally, helping leaders build stronger organizations through their people and processes. He specializes in leadership strategy, team building, training and development, coaching, and the design and implementation of global human resource management functions. Jake serves as a principal consultant at Morse Interactive, a professional development and consulting firm that supports clients throughout Canada and the United States. Jake has held leadership positions with a Fortune 100 company in financial services and is pursuing a PhD in organizational leadership from Regent College. He holds a master's degree in organizational leadership from Biola University and a bachelor's degree in economics from UCLA. Jake is the author of numerous professional and research journal articles, including Generation Z, the Rise of a New Generation, Generation Z and the Mental Health Crisis, Millennials and Generation Z's Perspective on Leadership Effectiveness, and A Pathway Towards Cultural Intelligence. His new book, Generation Z and the COVID-19 Crisis, will be available at retailers throughout North America coming this January. So Jake, you sent me an article there a couple of weeks ago entitled, What's Fueling the Great Resignation Among Younger Generations? And obviously such a relevant topic for companies and organizations who are feeling this, really a capacity vacuum left in the wake of these resignations. And I'm hoping today that you can give us some perspective on that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Stephen. And this is really a fascinating topic because the workplace is changing. There are more generational groups working together than ever before. There's more ethnicities and languages and religious preferences, and people working globally, remotely, and than ever before, right? So this upcoming generation, as leaders within our organizations, we need to make sure that we clearly understand what is it that's important to this next generation workforce. Because unlike past generations where the older generation basically can say, hey, if you don't like working here, the door's over there. Generation Z has a very powerful voice. They want to be significant. They want to be heard. And if you don't value and incorporate what's important to them, you are setting your organization, your business up for failure because they're brilliant. They have a lot of knowledge. They know a lot. They can multitask better than any generation before, and they want to be heard, like I mentioned. So let me share with you a little bit more about who Generation Z is. And Stephen, I love that you used the word Generation Z, because I'm hearing that a little bit more now too. And I don't know if that's just a Saskatoon Canadian angle on it, but I love it. I may have to start using it. I'll give you credit twice, but the third time I'll just use it. Okay. So if we're going to talk about this idea of generations, let's just take a quick look at what is a generation, right? I mean, we kind of know what a generation is, like people kind of born around the same time, but let's kind of formalize this definition. And this is the definition that I did in the book with my co-author, Maddie Prater, who's actually a recent graduate from Biola University. He wrote a book on Generation Z and the COVID-19 crisis. And we found that there was a need to define generation. So here's a formal definition that we utilize that, I think will be adopted as we move through the process of educating people on generational theory and different generation groups, right? A generation is a group of people generally of similar age, located within the same sphere of influence. They have experienced the same events, have grown up in the same environments, have experienced the same social situations during really critical development stages in their life, right? If you were a boomer and you grew up during the Vietnam era, there's something that you have in common with people of your age, right? Things that were happening in the news. If you were in the silent generation and you grew up during the Depression, there's some commonality that you have with that, right? Gen Zers are really the first full generation to be digital natives. They do not know life without technology, right? So they grew up in that. Whereas millennials and even Gen Xers were digital immigrants, meaning that we started off more in an analog space, maybe email before the rise of social media, and then moved into this digital space. So here's a sense of what a definition is. But now that we know what it is, let's look at a couple of things to give us a sense of the differentiation between groups, right? Let's frame this up a little bit more. And you're probably looking at when you were born and what category you belong to. These are guideline years of what general generational theorists and management professionals have determined are the cutoff dates that define each generation. Okay. Now, this does not mean that if you were born in 1995 that you're a millennial and you can only represent millennial qualities. In fact, if you were born in 95, chances are you're probably going to possess a lot of the same qualities that people that were born in 1996, 97, 98 possess. So you're going to have some generational blending is what we call it, where you may have that. And there are other circumstances that may cause you to have, to assimilate and practice behaviors from other generational groups. For example, if you were, I know Gen Xers that were born at the beginning of Gen X, in time frame, they were born maybe 1965, but they grew up with older siblings that were baby boomers. So they were exposed to the music of the baby boomers and all the type of things that the boomers did. And that influenced a lot of who they are. So even though they were born in the Generation X framework in terms of dates, they may still practice some of the boomer qualities. So I just want to make sure we got that across. Okay. What we're finding out now also is this idea of generational age compression, meaning what? Years ago, there was about 20 to 25 years that defined a generational group. That's how much time was needed for enough formative events to occur to define a generational group. As time has gone on, we are finding that the age bands for generational groups are getting smaller and smaller, meaning this, that if you were born, let's say between 1996 and let's say 2010, some people would say 2015 for Generation Z, you're being exposed to the volume of information and stimuli that previous generations had in 25 years, you're seeing in like 15 to 17 years. That's the amount of information that's coming in that you have to process if you're a Gen Zer. And that's good in a lot of facets because it makes you more knowledgeable about what's happening around the world. But it also causes issues around anxiety and depression and ADD. And there's a lot of wellness things that could occur. And we'll talk about that a little bit. So I just wanted to share you this as a guideline. If you look at the population by generation, and this is kind of a guidance in terms of the United States, generally speaking, about 26% of the population in the U.S. is Generation Z. Okay. Now, that will go up as people in the silent generation and baby boomers pass away, because it's happening as the people are retiring and passing away, especially older individuals, and COVID influenced that a little bit too, as older individuals were susceptible to symptoms and even dying because of COVID-19. The percentage of Gen Zers will increase. Okay. And I just have a couple facts here that I wanted to just share with you really quickly. This would be a good point to share it around Gen Z. 95% of teens report they have access to smartphones or smart devices. And that's worldwide, by the way. I spent some time in South Africa, in Johannesburg, outside in the cities near the squatter camps. And even in poverty, there were individuals that they didn't have luxuries of life, but they still had a smart device. That was something that people just had. Gen Z consumers are twice as more likely to shop and buy things on their mobile device than any other generation. So if you're a business or you're an organization that is marketing or recruiting and wanting to attract next generation talent, you want to make sure that you're plugged in to the technology atmosphere and that you're living in that space and that type of thing. But currently, we're seeing Gen Z moving into the workforce by storm. The oldest ones are now graduating college and working, and the youngest ones are moving into high school or, kind of getting ready for their futures. All right. So let's look at Generation Z. If we want to understand some techniques and some ways to communicate and connect with them, let's make sure we understand who they are. Okay. And again, I want to reemphasize, if you want to connect with Gen Z, you have to have the attitude in your organization of, how am I going to reach out and create an environment that attracts and retains and gives Gen Zers a career path at our organization? That's what they're looking for. Today's organizations, the burden is on you as organizations. If you want to attract the best talent out there, you have to provide environments that are welcoming and meet their needs, right? People aren't attracted to working in environments that aren't exciting for them. And those environments change slightly from generation to generation. Okay, so let's look at some specifics. A motto that I kind of came up with Gen Z, that kind of describes Gen Z is, hey, I want to make a difference in whatever I do. I want a job that's significant. I want to make a difference around the people that I'm with. I want to inspire. I want to connect. I want to be part of something bigger at a younger age. And you know what? Hey, I can do what I need to do for my laptop and my phone. And that allowed people that were Gen Z to actually adjust quickly to the virtual learning environments from a perspective of technology. But from the mental health and wellness perspective, maybe not so much, but they're tech fluent. They smart devices. Hey, they've been around mass shootings their whole lifetime. So that's influenced them, right? So we need to be aware of that. Gen Z is connected 24/7. They are inspired by social media influencers, by inspirational people like Greta Thunberg, who's, concerned about social issues and climate change. That is what's important to them. Social entrepreneurship and education to Gen Z. Many of them aren't just graduating now and saying, hey, I'm done with undergraduate. They're also now looking at, hey, what's next? Okay, what do I need to do next? Right? Globally minded. They began swiping before they began walking. Think about that. Again, they don't know life without technology, right? The challenge on the backside of that too is that a lot of Gen Zers have grown up where their self-worth has been dependent on what they've seen on social media and people responding to them, right? When you post a picture and people like it, the dopamine effect that you get from that, the excitement that you get, is the exact same effect that people get when they're gambling, right? So likewise, if you post a picture or you post something up and nobody responds or you get negative comments, for a lot of Gen Zers, it has affected their mental health and their self-worth. And that's something that we have to be careful of, right? They're less optimistic than millennials because they grew up during the recession and COVID-19. They saw people lose their homes and their cars and that kind of stuff during the recession. So they're more financially conservative about loans and that kind of stuff. So let me give you just a couple tips to wrap this up here. Gen Z, they're self-reliant. They're digital natives, value technology. They like both autonomous and collaborative working environments. So as organizational leaders, you want to provide opportunities for both open workspaces and maybe work independently and come back as a group. Gen Z is responsible. They're driven. They're entrepreneurial. They want to accomplish goals. They're very environmentally conscious in the workplace because they've been around mass shootings, right? Because they've been around, school drills as a youngster around terrorism. They value safety. They value relationships. We talked about social responsibility, simplicity, right? The Gen Zers that were on this call, they weren't on 10 minutes ahead of time. They came on right at the top of the hour because they value their time. They've got things going on. Keep it simple. They're innovative and they seek purpose and significance. So here are your tips. You want to connect with Gen Z. Number one is they like face-to-face interaction. Just because they like technology doesn't mean they don't like face-to-face. However, that face may be via Zoom or via FaceTime. They value that more than email and texting and even and emailing, texting, and even just phone calls. So FaceTime, that kind of stuff. Know your audience. They speak in net speak and emojis and GIFs and memes, right? I have conversations with my son that I'll ask him a question and he'll respond with a little short video, right? If I say, hey, we got tickets to this concert you want to go to, he'll send me a picture of like somebody dancing and I'd be like, what is this? And he's like, Dad, it means like, I'm excited about that. I'm like, oh, okay. So it took me a little while to get that, but that's how the communication happens, right? As leaders in organizations, lead by example, right? Gen Z is watching what you do. They value leadership that walks the talk, that says and does what that does what they say they're going to do, that meets their commitments. They love organizational leaders that provide coaching, that provide career paths that can show you what's possible if you're successful in this organization today. They like organizations that give you the opportunity to go, out and be philanthropic and do volunteer stuff. They look for companies that look beyond their four walls. They look for companies that value video technology and video learning and video training and that type of thing. Okay. So that's a starting point for us as we look at Gen Z in this kind of this first episode of connecting with Gen Z. Okay. So, hey, micro session. There you have it. Steve, I'm going to pass it back to you. We want to be very respectful of your time. So if you have to jump off, go ahead and jump off. Thank you very much. If you want to stay on, I think some people might have sent some questions. Feel free to stay on and we'll stick around for a little bit, but you are welcome to take off. Thanks for joining us today. Caitlin, a big thank you for your producing and support on the administrative side. Steve, thank you for your intro and kind of your facilitation. So, Steve, let me throw it back to you.
Yeah. Thanks, Jake. A lot of information packed into a short period of time there for sure. For the audience, if you've got anything that you'd like to ask Jake or get some feedback on, feel free to put that in the chat. One thing that has popped up here, Jake, is a question on career pathing. Mm-hmm. And I guess, maybe you could, from your experience, I know you're working with organizations a fair bit. What does that need to look like? How far down the road does that look like? What does it encompass? What are those key qualities that, I see there's a lot of Gen Zers on here. I also see a lot of people I know that's in management and that kind of thing. So what a great opportunity to talk about these two pieces.
That's great. And that's a great question, Steve, because some organizations don't take the time to be forward thinking with their organizations. As I mentioned, Gen Zers want to be part of something bigger, right? So I'll give you an example. Having worked in financial services, I worked for a bank for many years. And when people came in, our organization was very good about saying, hey, listen, welcome to your orientation. You are a teller today, but tomorrow you could be a manager. So in your orientation, this is how you become the best teller that you can be. But here's a little roadmap for you that says if you excel in your current position, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you can move down the sales route. Here's the map on the operations route. Here's the map towards management. And, depending on what you enjoy doing and what you accomplish, here's what is possible within our organization. And Generation Z craves that. They're looking beyond today and tomorrow because they want to be part of something bigger. If you want to attract them and keep them, you want to provide an avenue of what's possible, there in the long term. If not, Gen Z has no problem job hopping, right? Previous generations, if you job hopped, it looked really negative on your resume. But Gen Z has no problem working somewhere for a year, going to work at company B a year after that, and then coming back to company A again a year after that. Because today employers are saying, if we're losing high talent, it's not their fault. It's not that they're not being loyal. They found a place that meets their needs. So what are we going to do to make sure that we don't lose them? And career pathing, providing development opportunities within an organization is what's actually going to help them. And so I would say, 3 to 5 years at the very least, if you can. Gen Z loves startup opportunities too. And they know that, with startups, you maybe can't look 5 years down the road in terms of knowing exactly what your role might be. But at least allowing people to see what is possible if you're successful here. So a roadmap of potential positions, a list of skills that you'll develop as you go as you're working within the organization. So those are the type of things that I would tell you. Hey, being able to be mentored by other individuals. Gen Z loves that. They love being mentored. They love being mentors. And you might ask yourself, how could Gen Z mentor? You know what? Gen Z, they're brilliant. They know so much about technology and doing, global awareness of what's happening around the world. In some companies, I've put in programs where Generation Z is actually mentoring older generations in technology in a very non-threatening way in exchange for wisdom and knowledge and discernment from the older generation. So it's a mutually beneficial program. That could be part of the career pathing process. So that's what I would tell you, Steve.
Awesome. Yeah. And just another question that's popped up sort of in relation to that. It was one of our Gen Zers asking us, what they want to have an impact on the organization, but are sort of feeling some barriers in terms of just relating to the older folks, those older ones. Do you have any tips for them? And I guess and vice versa.
Sure.
And just what would help their message resonate with older folk?
Sure. Great question. If you want to be successful in the workplace, regardless of what generation you're in, make sure that you clearly understand and study what the priorities and the needs are of other generational groups, right? So if you're a Gen Z, you don't want to say, hey, this is just who I am, deal with it. You want to appreciate the uniqueness of other generational groups so that you can connect with them, right? Boomers love competition, right? They love interacting face to face. So if you need to talk to a boomer about something, you may not want to do it via text message. You may want to coordinate a face-to-face meeting if you're back at the office or a Zoom and take your time and build rapport with them. So each generation, you should be able to appreciate what characteristics and what are the things that drive other generational groups, right? Millennials, they're good with email. They're good with texting. Millennials tend to be a little more optimistic about things. But they also, throughout history have been a little bit more, I don't want to say financially irresponsible, but they took on a lot more debt. Whereas Gen Zers are a little bit more cautious about that because they've seen what could happen if you maybe get into too much debt or you're not careful about that. So, my first advice is, make sure that you're also aware of what is important to other generational groups. And we'll probably talk about those in some other webinar series. And that will help you understand other generational groups. The first thing I would tell you is older generational groups tend to want to be a little bit more face-to-face. And I would consider that in order to make the connection. Don't just assume that they know everything that you know just because you're a Gen Zer. Don't assume that they know technology like you know technology. And don't think less of older generations because they don't have the technological experience that you do. Keep in mind that they have years of experience. And chances are they're probably in that leadership or that managerial role because they did something right. So there's things that you could learn from them as well. So broaden your scope of thinking, and all great leaders do that, right? They know their audience. They treat people equally, but not the same, right? They know that certain types of individuals you can approach with a little bit more of a in your face kind of, constructive, approach. Others, you need to be a little bit more cautious and ask them how they feel, and you want to understand their personality dimensions. In that same respect, you want to do the same as a Gen Zer, considering the older groups.
Sounds like having some patience with each other will go a long way.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point, Steve, because patience, that is an area that Gen Z struggles with a little bit, because they're used to swiping and, going back and forth on their phones from one email to their school schedules, to grades, to calendars, to, Yelping and that kind of stuff, that they're used to moving through things very quickly. So when they have to sit down for a long period of time, that could sometimes be an issue. And the swiping and this mindset that technology has somewhat kind of rewired the Gen Zer brain, we're seeing attention spans get shorter and shorter too, and that's causing an issue. So if you're a Gen Zer, make sure, to Steve's point, take time to be patient, ask questions, and don't rush conversations to get to the point. Build rapport, build connection. Okay? Thanks, Steve.
I guess this sort of leads to the next question that popped up here. And, Jake, we've, in the other facilitations that we do, or the workshops, we talk a lot about relevance and knowing that, what I'm doing has an impact on the overall organization, and maybe even a greater impact on the greater good of society. So one of the questions from one of our Gen Zers here, how do I sort of square that in my mind when I don't have the experience to have the truly impactful job? It seems like I'm always starting at the bottom, not being listened to. What do I need to do to maybe it's messaging again, or what are some tips for those Gen Zers feeling like they're not being heard?
Sure. The first thing is be excellent at the job you were hired to do. Remember, if you're just starting a job and you're a coordinator, which is often a first position, or an analyst, or an entry-level position, don't think that you are entitled to sit at the table with the CEO and tell them what you think about things, right? Know that things take time. Be patient. First, be excellent at your job, right? Let people see that you shine, and you want to earn the right to be able to contribute at a high level. One of the things that we saw with millennials when they were graduating college, a lot of them grew up in an environment where, and my kids kind of went through this as well. And it was our fault as parents. We spoiled them. We told them you could do no wrong. And they grew up in an environment where they thought that everything was good and they were great at everything. And then when they got into the workplace, it was a wake up call when the CEO said, know your place. I didn't ask you your opinion. And then they would freak out and they would quit. Because they're like, what do you mean? This is not what I thought it was. I can't be significant here. Well, you can be significant, but remember, if you're starting in an organization, why don't you spend time learning about the organization, learn about the culture, learn about the industry, be excellent at your job. And I promise you, over time, people actually begin to ask you, hey, listen, what do you think about this? Then hey, I've earned the right to do that. Or as you build rapport and you get to know people in an organization, you might say, hey, listen, you got a couple moments? I had an idea I thought I might want to share. But you don't want to walk into an executive meeting that you weren't invited to and say, hey, I have some things to say. Or, hey, why do we do things this way? Because you haven't earned that right yet. Don't feel that entitlement to think that you can do that. You can still be significant by being excellent at what you do and earning that right. And deep inside, that doesn't mean that you stuff away your desire to be significant and have purpose, but you're just more emotionally intelligent and aware that it's going to take time. It's just going to take some time. All right. So give yourself that grace to just take some time to learn about things first. Be patient with yourself. And as leaders, we need to be patient with our team members.
I suppose it's also about working for organizations that allow you to maybe to pursue some of your passions, especially with respect to social justice and any charitable type things that you might want some time during the year to be able to commit to that. So giving you that, even though you have to do this other part of your job, giving you the sense that I'm also being given time to do some good in the world.
Yeah, and see, the one point I'll kind of just to build on that. if you're a Gen Zer on this call, do what you feel you're called to do. Like, pursue your desires and passions. Don't be so concerned about what other people think you should be doing. Chase the things that fire you up. If you have a startup business idea, okay, you may need to work while you get that idea off the ground, but pursue that idea. You know, if somebody says, well, you need to be an accountant because that's where the money is, you may make some money, but you'll probably be miserable over time. Chase the things that you're excited about. And you know what? The money will follow. Okay. But don't do things. And Gen Zers tend to be pretty good about this because they want to be purposeful and significant. They tend to move and look for jobs in areas that mean something to them. So if you're not getting applicants in your organization, you might want to go back and look at your vision statement, your mission statement. You know, I had somebody the other day that said, we're not getting any new Gen Zers into our company. I said, well, let's look at your website. And you know what they said? Well, we don't have one quite yet. Well, if I was a Gen Zer, I'd be like, you don't even have a website. You probably don't even appreciate technology. You know, I don't know how long you're going to be in business, but this company over here, they're up in Instagram and, you know, Snapchat, and they've got a Facebook. They're appealing to all the generational groups. Their training is set up in the form of gamification. So you earn badges and you're part of something fun and an adventure that mimics the video games that Gen Zers play, that type of thing. Those are the organizations that are landing the high talent, the ones that are creating environments that are accommodating and are meeting the needs of Generation Z.
Awesome. Yeah, just one last question that came through, Jake, and you've already touched on it a little bit here. I think we'll wrap up with this one. But, you know, when we talk about technology, you know, I hear a lot of the Gen Xers and the older ones seeing the investment dollars, you know, adding up in their mind as they think about these kinds of things. What's sort of some best practices? What's some things to think about when maybe we are one of these companies that hasn't really embraced technology. You know, how do we look at allocating budgets towards that? How much do we do? What are just some good things to be thinking about? Just as a final thought, Jake.
Sure. And I would tell you, if you're within an organization that maybe is behind the times of technology, there's a trade-off. You can operate like you've been operating, but I'll tell you, the future of the workforce is technologically driven. They're knowledge thinkers, critical thinkers, problem solvers, regardless of level of education. Those are the type of jobs that are becoming more popular. So, you know, I would say technology should be at the top of the list. For operational efficiency. Right? There's programs out there that work across different platforms that help you become efficient and will help you save time. There are companies that use software for talent acquisition, and it walks you through the whole thing. You can save time, less people that you need to hire. So from an operational efficiency standpoint, setting aside the appropriate budget, right? Doesn't mean you just buy iPads for everybody as a gift, you know, like, hey, here we want to be technologically, you know, on the cutting edge so everybody gets an iPad. No, be very, very thoughtful. But, you know, are people able to, if you're working an hourly job, are they able to log in their phone and put their hours in and see when they're scheduled? Like those type of things, it's expected now. So those things should be very, very top of mind. And I'll tell you that as we move into the next 2 to 5 years, even more so, companies that are not leveraging technology, it's no longer a luxury. It's a necessity to attract the high potential, high talent workforce. So, you know, that may look different in different companies. So it's just something you want to be thinking about in that respect.
Awesome. Thank you, Jake. And thank you to everyone for your great questions, your insights. We really appreciate it. And you know, we'll have another session coming up here in the beginning of January. So look out to that on all of our socials. And we look forward to seeing you all again. Thank you so much for coming.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful afternoon. Appreciate your time today.
Cheers. See you later.
Thank you, Mr. Aguas.
You got it. Have a good one. We'll see you soon.
Bill.